Adelaide, one of Australia's greatest tourist attractions. Perhaps the most civilized, elegant little city in the southern hemisphere. A pretty, gentle place on the human scale, offering year-round peace, quiet, refined wines, and nothing noisier than a koala belching after an excess of gum chips. But for one raucous weekend, this tranquil haven falls prey to white-knuckle fever as the petrol heads flock towards it from all over the planet. After touring the world through 16 other cities, the Grand Prix circus comes to town, and staid, laid-back Adelaide sprouts the blatant bunting of sponsorship. At colossal expense, the city converts a whole midtown area into a Grand Prix circuit. As a sport, Formula One attracts the biggest TV audience on Earth, but it's also a multi-billion-pound business. Most fans only ever see the action on the track. Even more drama goes on in the exclusive backstage area called the paddock, where the corporate sponsors, team managers, drivers, and starry people in general schmooze, pose, wheel, deal, and spread rumors. Into this glamorous setting, I came unglamorously striding. It was Friday, 2 days before the race on Sunday, and already the air was an intoxicating cocktail of high-octane petrol and premium-priced cosmetics. And that was just the men. As always, the high-revving, high-earning drivers had attracted glossy women the way a neon dollar sign attracts moths. I was here by invitation, and hoping to spot some of the faces I had mugged up from my Who's Who in Formula One book on the long flight over. The media were here too, and they seemed to have already found their quarry. Ferrari star Gerhard Berger, he of the bedroom eyes. Women who know nothing about racing cars seem to know a lot about Berger. If the press didn't nail the drivers, autograph hounds were lying in wait whenever they broke cover. The brilliant Scottish newcomer David Coulthard is still mastering the art of signing without stopping. With more experience, Cockney Sparrow Johnny Herbert can swerve out of danger at top speed. You could be sure that any big media scrum had someone charismatic in the middle of it. It was the other Ferrari star, Jean Alesi, celebrated for his shy charm and determination to go flat out even with his engine on fire. And moving unobtrusively through the whole thing was the man who controls it. Bernie Eccleston built Formula One into a mega-budget, super high-tech, globe-girdling circus just by having a word in all the right ears. What Bernie says goes at 200 miles an hour. Trackside of the paddock, the pit lane is a whole street of garages, like a London Mews redesigned by NASA. High-rent homes away from home for 12 different teams ranging from struggling to triumphant. The Williams team is one of the front runners. And here was their star, Damon Hill, Britain's hero and one of the two top contenders in Formula One today. Shy, decent, a wickedly quick driver of the quickest car there is. Whether he was discussing the car's handling characteristics or ordering a sandwich, it didn't seem exactly the right time to engage him in conversation. Maybe later. Hill might have been world champion this year, except for a series of unfortunate collisions with a driver who annoyingly somehow manages to be slightly faster in a slightly slower car. Germany's Michael Schumacher. At the age of only 26, he has already scored 19 victories and won the world championship twice. But his reputation for uncanny speed is matched by his reputation for arrogance. So far this season, he has come into high-speed contact with Damon 3 times and hasn't apologized once. Whether Damon and Schumi would hit each other again in Sunday's race was bound to be a big topic in the 2 days leading up to it. But for now, it was time to check in with my hosts for the weekend, the Jordan team, who on half the budget of the front runners were getting tantalizingly close to the top. Their garage was an operating theater, clinically clean, not a drop of oil visible, and everybody present looked as highly qualified as a brain surgeon. They were all working hard to adapt the car to the track and to improve its performance and handling without further weakening its Achilles heel, reliability. One of the two Jordan drivers is Eddie Irvine from Northern Ireland. A famously effervescent character, Irvine has spent half the season barely bottling up his frustration at a car that frequently conks out with the victory podium almost in sight.
His power is the problem.
Well, it's not a matter of the power is good, it's just the drivability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's coming out of the slow corners, you've nothing, and then you've too much.
Yeah.
Is the big problem.
So the power's got to be in the right place.
It's got to be evenly spread.
Last-minute breakdowns have also dogged Jordan's other driver, Rubens Barrichello from Brazil. A temperamental car makes it hard for both drivers to compete against the front runners, and perhaps even more important, against each other, because the rivalry between a team's two drivers is probably the most intense there is. In charge of this and every other aspect of the team is the man with his name on it, Irish dynamo Eddie Jordan. He very nicely pretended to understand what I was screaming in his ear. When I thanked him for his hospitality, he told me the car was improving. And when I asked him how the car was, he said it was no trouble at all. But as the cars were wheeled out for the first qualifying session, you only had to look at them to realize why the whole world's techno-nerds are crazy about Formula One. The cars are so powerful and so light that they will go on accelerating until they melt. They reach 200 miles an hour on any straight longer than a few city blocks, and not much less through any curve more open than a hairpin. And from 0 to 100 and back again takes only a breath, if you can breathe at all. How do you drive one of those things? As long as he didn't have to be there if I ever tried, Eddie Irvine was ready to show me how. How do you move your hands to change gears in such a confined space?
You just, that's change up.
Oh, it's all here, all here.
Oh yeah, everything's there. Select first, let the clutch out, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, sixth, fifth, fourth, third, second. So you can use your left hand for the clutch or the right hand, depending on which way you're spinning.
That'll happen as fast as you like. You go bang, 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 bang,
and
you can't jump
changes gear in, I think, 15,000 for the second or something.
Well, how much would there be in, they say, the accelerator? How much travel?
2 inches.
2 inches for 200 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to get a trembly foot, would you?
Well, because we've got a fly-by-wire throttle, where it's just a potentiometer down there. There's no actual direct link between it and the engine. It's just done by computer.
It's not a mechanical link. So if you did tremble, the computer would sort it out.
Sorry?
If you trembled, the computer would sort that out.
The computer has a sort of a filter in there. So when you hit bumps, your foot does jump around. So it just takes them out. It evens it out.
So a nervous man like me could drive one of these things.
Oh yeah. Well, we can sort the computer.
If I could get into it.
We'd probably have to reprogram it, but.
If I could get into it, the computer would help me drive it. No, it wouldn't, would it? I wouldn't get.
You never know. Never know.
I never would know. That was my tragedy. The rewards of a racing driver would never be mine. But to hell with the rewards. Just driving a car like that would be reward enough. What does it feel like if you can do it? This weekend was my chance to ask the men who know.
It's like being strapped in a roller coaster, and you just really are being thrown around, battered and bruised, and a lot of power there. But more than the power, the thing that really gets you is the braking forces. It really is like someone taking a hammer to the back of your head when you hit the brakes.
You get a lot of battering. Physically, it's tough, but the speed is the thing. I think that's the common thing. I think you'll find with most drivers is they like to sit in a vehicle that can take off like a rocket and corner at incredible speeds.
It's like if you go at Disneyland and you play with all the machines. It's so great, it's so fabulous, but you have to control everything because otherwise you can be quickly in the wall. So actually it's a huge fun.
The huge fun got underway. The cars were fired up and sent out to qualify. They weren't really racing each other at this stage. They were racing the clock, trying to get a quick time that would place them high on the starting grid for Sunday's race. They were still a sight fit to rouse a petrolhead to a frenzy of admiration, and any environmentalist to a paroxysm of anguish. In the lightning bolt down the straight, every car was carving deeply into the world's diminishing supply of fossil fuels. To hold a car on the track through the corners, it takes upside-down wings and fat, sticky tires that cost 1,600 pounds a set, and each car will go through 7 sets in the weekend. Outlay on this scale is sometimes justified by its supposedly beneficial effects on the car you drive on the road, but in fact there's only one real justification: the huge fun. All the onlookers, including myself, were filled with the romance of motor racing, until the McLaren driver Mika Häkkinen reminded us that Formula One is not only glamorous and sexy and fabulously exciting, it is also dangerous. Proverbially quick in the twisty bits, Häkkinen was accelerating hard through a series of right-angle corners towards the final fourth gear 120 miles an hour screamer into the long straight. But when he got there, it all went wrong. Everybody was watching the monitors and just waiting. The sad news filtered through that there were fears for Häkkinen's life. Did you see what happened?
Just lost the back end. I think he hit the curb. The curbs here are very high, and when you just touch them, it fixes the car. And it looks like he's hit the curb and he's lost the rear end and hit the curb on the outside, which has launched him.
Yeah.
And he's went straight into the wall there.
Häkkinen's car was brought in, ominously draped in black. Häkkinen had already been sped to intensive care before qualifying resumed. It resumed because in Formula One, potential death is part of the equation. Whatever else was on the drivers' minds, the necessity to qualify high was still uppermost. The two Jordans went back to their familiar task of trying to find enough usable speed without something going wrong. On twice as big a budget, a Lacey's Ferrari sounded like a garbage disposal unit that had swallowed a J-cloth. But to the joy of all the women present, Berger's Ferrari was running like fingertips on silk. The Jordans looked as if they might be getting somewhere. But Schumacher's Benetton was strangely slow, and wiseacres decided there must be something wrong with the car. There is rarely anything wrong with Schumacher. Coulthard was comfortably quicker than the Benettons and the Ferraris. During the year, he had generally been at least as fast as his more experienced teammate rival, Hill, but had sometimes spoiled things with a silly mistake. Hill went out late to put in a final fast one. Like all the other drivers after Häkkinen's accident, Hill had a heavy heart, but he also had a heavy right foot. Ahead of Coulthard, Berger and everybody else, Damon finished the session with the fastest time and provisional pole position. That meant he would start the race from the best spot unless somebody else qualified faster tomorrow. With the session over, out of the splendid isolation of the cockpit, the drivers climbed and back into the real world. I asked Eddie Irvine how things had gone.
The engine's very peaky. It's on-off. It's an on-off switch. You can't drive smoothly out of the corner because there's no power initially, and then there's too much. As you're trying to come out of the corner, you try to feed it in smoothly. And this thing, it's just like switching on a light.
In the uproar of engine noise, I lost some of the technicalities, but I caught his drift. All the car needed to be a bitch was false eyelashes and stiletto heels. Meanwhile, the massed mass media were waiting for solid news about Häkkinen's fate. All the McLaren team's PR people had to offer was a handout that put him somewhere between life and death. As the team started the long process of preparing for next day, everyone was thinking about the missing man, and nobody was thinking harder than the other drivers. But on the other side of town, one of them very kindly agreed to talk to me. I asked Damon Hill how much work he did between races.
Sometimes I do 3 days Grand Prix, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Have 2 days off, and then I do 3 days testing. So the 2 days off, that's when I see my family, have some sleep, get home for a start, travel in other words, and then I'm off again testing. So this season's been very, very tough. And on top of that, I have promotional things to do for sponsors from occasionally, not all the time.
And they can't be dodged, though.
Well, I try and keep them to a minimum, but the sponsors pay for the car to go round, and they pay my wages, and so inevitably you do as much as you can for them.
Is the money important to you?
Yes, it is, because I've invested my life into getting to this point in my career, and I'm not trained for anything else, so when I stop, I've got to have made as much money as I can.
How do you relax away from the track?
Well, I have a family, so one of the best ways for me to relax is to spend some time at home and be with my wife and the children. And there's a massive contrast to being at a Grand Prix when you get home and you've got 4-year-olds and 3-year-olds and crawling all over you and asking you to help them out with their drawings or crayons or whatever they're doing. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to introduce you to both Mr. Damon Hill and Mr. David Coulthard.
That evening, Hill and Coulthard put in a compulsory appearance at their chief sponsor's cocktail party. As befitted his position of the team's more illustrious driver, Damon spoke first.
It'll set us up for next year, and we're certainly, whatever happens here, we'll be back next year in full force to win the championship and try and achieve our goals that we didn't achieve this year.
As befitted his position of driver with plans to be more illustrious than he yet was, Coulthard spoke second.
Yeah, I'm actually pleasantly surprised, because this morning I was finding it quite tricky with the car and also learning the track.
Elsewhere, at another sponsorial soiree, Eddie Irvine and Rubens Barrichello were having an equally thrilling time.
Yes, it's great to have you back here.
It's wonderful to be back.
Great. Yes. You remember...
It's my pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. Now, this thing started off as a cocktail party for our friends at Jordan.
A bit more of this mandatory jollity, and the drivers were ready for bed. Everybody else, including most of Australia's jet set, turned up at the Grand Prix ball. Tickets were $340 Australian each. The dummy drivers would be the nearest thing to a real-life racing hero that most of the glitterati would get to see that night. But Bernie Eccleston was there, all set to have a word in the right ears. The word he had in my right ear was, "Can't talk now, there's a bloke I have to look after." There was, too. The undisputed king of a smoothly functioning world and the third prince down the line in a far less efficient organization. They made an attractive couple. Everyone went into the ballroom, where they would sit down to dinner and enjoy a show. In the Australian manner, both these things were soon happening simultaneously. It was all too crowded and noisy for anyone to notice that the drivers weren't there. They were asleep in their hotels, trying not to dream. Some of them were trying not to dream about hitting each other. Others were trying not to dream about the car falling apart when they could almost taste the champagne froth. And they were all trying not to dream about the man who would be lucky if he was dreaming at all. Tomorrow, we would find out. Saturday in Adelaide, the final day of qualifying before the race on Sunday. Out at the track in the Jordan garage, the drivers were the last to arrive for breakfast. The engineers and mechanics had been working all night, still trying to enhance the car's overall grunt. It's a long, hard slog to the top, and the man with his name on the car must find it hard to keep smiling. But you would have thought that Eddie Jordan was still playing with his first Meccano set. How much does it cost to run a team?
Well, it can vary, and various different teams have various amounts of money, and I think the major teams, if you're talking about, we say the Williams and the Benetton team, they're all in the region of between $50 and $70 million US per year. And that doesn't include the engines, because the engines are being supplied by manufacturers, and that's the normal routine price for the major teams.
You're a leading middle team. What sort of money are we talking about here?
Well, our income level has increased a lot recently, and over the last number of years we're working on a budget of about 25 million US dollars. That doesn't include the engine, because the engines are supplied to us by Peugeot, our new partner, and quite honestly that's our future. Peugeot are potentially the biggest thing for Jordan, and hopefully vice versa, because that will give us both the power and the income level to be able to attack the major team.
Do you think you can be the #1 team?
I don't really think I could continue like this if I didn't think that. I am pretty convinced in my mind that it will happen. There will be problems on the way, naturally enough, and I'm prepared to withstand that problems and stress and pain, but usually at the end of the pain, if the pleasure is there, I'm happy, and I think it will happen.
Even as we talked, the team had gone back to spending those millions of dollars. To give their drivers a chance, the car would have to be pushed to the limit. It wasn't the right time to think of what might lie beyond the limit. It wasn't the right time, but you couldn't blame people for being gripped by the subject. Outside the McLaren garage, they were still waiting for news about Häkkinen. All they were getting so far was rumors. He was still on life support. He might never drive again. But suppose he could. Would he want to? How hard is it to get into a racing car again after a big accident? When Gerhard Berger lost his steering and rammed the wall full tilt, only his flame suit saved him from the fire.
You know, if I would have today the accident with the fire, I'm not sure if I would be able to overcome it again and to go into it again. But I was younger, and it was possible to do it. But yeah, it's big accidents are always points in your career what makes you change or makes you think different or makes you do things different.
A horrendous crash meant 2 shattered legs and an interrupted career for Schumacher's teammate Johnny Herbert.
I always believed for some reason that I would get back into Formula One. I don't know why. And when I did that, my feet weren't even moving at all then. But I just had this inner belief that I would get back into it. So that really pushed me and helped me through everything.
Still living with the embossed hallmarks of the crash that should have killed him is the great world champion Niki Lauda.
It is very difficult because basically you have to ask yourself, is it worthwhile doing? And as long as the motivation is found that racing enjoyment is bigger than the bad side of it, you keep on doing it. If one day you realize that the enjoyment is not there anymore and you're left over with the bad side of it, then you have to stop.
Everybody remembers the danger, but when the engines start up, the drivers forget it. Damon Hill really only has one thing on his mind: to win this race and prove that Schumacher isn't invincible. Schumacher, on the other hand, would like to pile up yet further proof that he is invincible. But before he and Damon can achieve their respective aims, they first have to qualify, like everybody else. Late in the morning, there was an hour of untimed practice so that the teams could tweak their cars for the next qualifying session. Once again, the drivers had to go right to the limit so that the car would reveal its problems. Some of the problems were revealed in spectacular fashion. Mika Salo's Tyrrell had a problem with one of the corners. Not even the great Schumacher was problem-free. Some of the problems could be picked up only by the instruments on the car that were reporting electronically all the time to the high-tech equipment in the garage. It looks like mission control in there and costs about the same. Studying the readouts, the Jordan and Peugeot engineers can tell what every component on the car is doing. While ordinary mortals might as well be watching Star Trek. But finally, there can be no substitute for what the driver says. Bemused by all the bloops and bleeps, I asked Eddie Irvine for a verbal update.
We made a modification to the engine there, which has made it better. but it's just understeering, so you can't get the car turned.
Understeer means you turn the wheel and it doesn't.
Yeah.
Is that it?
So it's understeer. Oversteer means you turn it and it turns too much.
Oh, right, yeah. I never could sort those two out, but then it's...
Sorry?
I never could sort those two things out.
Well, that's it explains. Complete clarity.
It was the lunch break before final qualifying. The hospitality suites were open for business, and the business depends on the drivers turning up to wrap it on as per contract.
I would say, we had a few problems, but
A comparative new boy, Rubens Barrichello is still getting used to being nice to the sponsors at the very time when he'd like to be lying down somewhere quiet, figuring out what to do about his oversteer, understeer, overdraft and underwear.
And hopefully we're going to be there for the last race. Would be great to be on the podium in Australia.
Organising the sponsors' money for the Williams team, Richard West was refreshingly candid about the economics of a small company getting its name on a mobile billboard. What would it cost me for the smallest thing you could sell me?
Currently, Clive, I've got two packages which we're still negotiating. So the little space on the front wing end plate, which currently says Segafredo, if that were in the marketplace, you and I'd be sitting down at the moment talking about $2 million.
$2 million?
$2 million.
Would it show up on television?
It wouldn't be what we call television visible. We'd have to sell you on a package of hospitality and rights issues and driver appearances, but you get great value for money.
I took a look at my $2 million television invisible display space. I decided to avail myself of the opportunity at some future time. Yes, in today's Grand Prix world, money is sexier than sex used to be, but the bright-eyed young ladies went on turning up in steadily growing strength. In cave-dwelling times, they wore mini loincloths and headed undeviatingly towards the Formula One hunter. Nowadays, the drivers are the great hunters. Do the hunters get hunted?
No, nothing to do with women. I'm married, have a child, nothing to do with women.
From time to time, but of course I ignore them.
The Japanese are the worst.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, when you go to the Suzuka especially, they're just completely mad. And they're just all this screaming mayhem behind you. They're very excitable.
Well, first of all, I have my fiancée, so I'm okay. But it's a kind of sport where everybody's exciting, and of course sometimes we have the possibility to meet nice girls, but like I said, I'm fiancée, it's okay.
There are some ladies come round to the circuits, and that's, as a young guy, that's always entertaining to watch, but there's some of the other old hand drivers, you can watch them in performing, but I have a girlfriend, so I behave myself.
Coulthard's girlfriend, Andrea Murray, has a career of her own as an international model, but she's here for the race. Why are all those other women here?
I don't know. I mean, some are working, some are girlfriends or wives, and others are, of course, the groupies. But there's not so many.
So are you hooked on the sport or are you hooked on the guy?
I think I'm hooked on the guy. I think there's no reason why I come constantly to all the races if I didn't love the guy. So, no, definitely. I'm here for David, and that's the main reason, or the only reason.
How do you cope with the danger element?
Well, there's two ways of thinking about it. You can think, oh, God, it's a horrible sport, and they'll crash and die. Or you can think, how many people in the world can suddenly crash and within 10 seconds have an ambulance and a couple of doctors and, head specialists, within seconds. And as well, they're wearing seat belts, a crash helmet, fireproof gear, They're a lot safer than a driver on the road.
Comforted by the ready availability of high-grade medical facilities, Andrea's boyfriend David was out on the track. The decisive qualifying session had begun, and he was going too fast to suit his teammate Damon. But Damon was soon going even faster. His car was running like a Swiss train. Here was the ideal solution of the Formula One equation, a piece of modern sculpture propelled by burning money. Meanwhile, Schumacher was getting it together at last. He was still a split second down on Hill and Coulthard, but it looked as if he would start from third spot. If only Jordans could find a bit more oomph. They looked as if they were going like the clappers, But they were still that crucial second per lap down on the pace, which in an 80-lap race would leave them a whole 2 miles adrift. That 15 other drivers were doing even worse was small consolation to either Irvine or Barrichello. Every time they came into the pits, the engineers and mechanics were working with them to push the car as close as possible to the line dividing top performance from total disaster. Disaster was what Damon almost had. Pushing it beyond the limit, he straddled exactly the same curb that launched Häkkinen. But he managed to hold things together. The replay proved that racing drivers earn their money by reacting with cool hands at exactly the same moment when you and I would have them over our eyes. At the end of the session, Damon hadn't improved on his Friday time, but since nobody else had either, he was rewarded with pole position for Sunday.
How did that go?
Well, it was very exciting. I think it's one way of describing it. I went over a curb and went off in almost the same fashion that Mika went off yesterday, but of course I didn't have a puncture, which he had, I believe, and so I managed to get back on the track.
Quite a quick corner, that isn't it? Fourth gear?
It's very quick. I mean, put it this way, you wouldn't want to drive into a wall at that speed.
I also took the risk of asking the frustrated Eddie Irvine how things had gone for him.
Yeah, we improved the car, haven't improved position because everyone else seems to have improved a bit more, so a bit disappointing. I think I'm down to 9th at the minute.
So what are the prospects for the race starting from there?
Not as good as it was starting from 5th, I suppose, but it should be all right. Just keeping out of trouble is going to be the big thing. You know, 9th position, you're sort of in the middle, and first corner is a nightmare.
But up at the front, when the green light shone tomorrow, Schumi would be breathing down Damon's neck. For Damon, it would be like having a nightmare through a mirror. What is Schumacher? Is he a bird? Is he a plane? Is he a new Teutonic knight on a mission of conquest?
I think he's an arrogant little bugger, but apart from that, I think he's probably the best Formula One driver around at the moment.
This year, he had not the best car and he won the championship, and he did a great job.
Mike was ruthless. You know, he's dedicated, he knows what he wants to do and he gets on and does it.
When he's at the circuit, he's like totally focused, and you know, he's not the funniest sort of guys, but you know, he seems to lighten up quite a lot when he's had a few bevies.
Schumacher grants interviews with the frequency of a stone emitting blood. But I got to Bernie. Bernie promised to have a quiet word in Schumi's hard-edged ear, and in due course the champ fronted up to be probed.
Why is physical fitness so important to a driver?
Because it's very hard to drive a race car nearly 2 hours around the circuit like here in Adelaide. You need to be fit for this, mentally, physically, and to be through all the race on the limit, and to achieve the best lap times or victories in the same way, you need to work out yourself. And I particularly like to work out myself. I get the very strong mental thing by being more than normally fit. I need this.
I know you can control the car in almost any circumstances, but sometimes the car goes out of control. Do you ever get frightened when that happens?
If I have an off, like in Imola earlier this year, it's very important for me to understand why I had this. And I have no problems to tell myself, okay, I made a mistake, because if I had done, I have to know why I've done the mistake, to learn out of it, and to not do it again. I know that we're all human beings and we all do mistakes, but you have to learn out of your mistakes. And I always have done this. I never have done mistakes twice. And that's the point. I always get fighting for the car. I'm always looking after the car while I have an accident. I hope that not too much damage is going on to the car. But I never was frightened for myself.
What do you do to relax away from the track?
I go walking with my dogs, my wife. I enjoy nature very much. It gives me very much if I wake up in the morning and I see the sun rising, or in the evening see the sun going down, see stars at the sky. It gives me very much, it gives me much more than anything else.
I found him no more arrogant than William Wordsworth being interviewed about a host of golden daffodils. But then Schumi had never shunted me off the track at 100 plus. Speaking of which, there was great news about Häkkinen. An official announcement said he would live and might even drive again. This was backed up by a strong rumor that he had woken up and checked his private parts, regarded in the Grand Prix world as a sure sign of a man on the mend. It was a huge relief to the whole Formula One circus. The drivers started playing jokes on each other again. Gerhard Berger gave Eddie Irvine a piece of cake for his birthday. Adelaide, which had been faced with a funeral, now had a clear conscience to spend the whole night celebrating. But in the Jordan pit, they would spend the whole night working. Tomorrow was the race, and this time, surely, all their efforts would be rewarded. Race day, and more than 200,000 ticket holders were soon in position. The biggest crowd for any Grand Prix, anytime, anywhere. Various diversions were laid on to keep them happy. In Australia, bagpipes count as entertainment instead of torture. Pit stop practice. Like every other team, Jordan would have to bring their cars in at least twice for fuel and tires, and the speed in and out of the pits could make all the difference. A car stationary for 10 seconds gives away almost half a mile to a car that's moving, so the pressure to keep the stop short is enormous. And Jordans didn't want another downer today. They'd had too many. In the paddock behind the pits, the experts had only one thing on their minds. At exactly what point on the circuit would Hill and Schumacher expensively eliminate each other as a prelude to the usual tight-lipped press statements and frosty glances? Damon was trying hard to look as if he didn't care very much about Schumi. Schumi was trying hard to look as if he didn't care very much about Damon. But this same race last year was when they had started bumping into each other. They had tried to share a corner when there was room for only one. This season, they had made a habit of it, starting at the British Grand Prix, where Damon had been perhaps a trifle optimistic about getting through on the inside. After the Belgian Grand Prix, each of them said it was the other's fault when Schumi was obliged to take an alternative route through France. In the Italian Grand Prix, they once again fell victim to mutual road rage. How much did they really hate each other? I had to know. Not even Bernie thought it possible to get them together in the same room to talk it over, but he promised to have a word in their respective ears. Whatever the word was, it must have worked in German as well as English.
Dankeschön. Bitteschön. Have you two ever managed to laugh at anything together?
I think we did, yeah. But I don't remember it. We are not best friends doing everything together, but we respect each other, and I think much more than newspapers and television sometimes tell.
Damon, what do you really think of Michael?
I think he's a very fine racing driver, in all honesty. I mean, I can't take anything away from what he does as a driver. The problems arise through this kind of barrier. We know, I don't talk to Michael directly about what happens. You know, I get to hear about something that via the press, and then they come and ask you, what do you think of that? And then it goes backwards and forwards. You know, that's how sometimes these things get out of hand.
Michael, what do you really think of Damon?
I think we had fantastic racing this year and the year before. Close racing, and we entertained the public. That's what the people are looking for when they look at Formula One. That's what I'm looking for when I race a car. I want to fight with someone, and that's what he done to me. He made it difficult for me. Fortunately, I was able to be ahead after the fightings. That's what makes yourself certainly more happy. But I'm looking forward to the future, to have some more battles with him.
So what about the race?
And for me, I really want to go and win this last race. Go into the winter time with victory. That would be nice.
More victories. Yeah, it'd be nice to get one, actually. I've had a barren patch, if you like, so the last race of the season does set you up nicely for the winter, so it would be nice to win here.
Well, perhaps you'd like to wish each other good luck for the race?
Yeah, I do.
Good luck, Mike.
That's what they said. When they got into their cars, we would see what they did. Outside, the razzmatazz was peaking to a climax. This would be the last Australian Grand Prix held in Adelaide, and the drivers were going to miss its relaxed spirit. In most cities at this stage of race day, they would rather lie down in their hotel rooms with a cold towel over their foreheads than go out on a parade lap so the paying public can see what they look like without their helmets. In the group photo, they exuded nothing but mutual admiration. Alesi obviously didn't mind a bit about Schumi taking his place at Ferrari next season for triple the salary. Damon didn't kick Schumi's chair even once. But behind their smiling faces, the drivers had already begun to forget which country they were in. Their minds were on the race, a country by itself. In the pit lane, Prince Edward was trying to sign up Damon to star opposite Schumacher in a situation comedy called Men Driving Badly. Drawing a blank, he went off to find Bernie and have a word in his ear. In the back of the pits, the drivers were at last free from the hoo-ha. A good result depends on tactics as much as on overall speed, and at their pre-race briefing, the Jordan team were planning their strategy.
What do you reckon, Eddie, on 3?
Kill the brakes and do 2. There'll be no brakes left. That's the bit of there'll be brakes left for 3.
They were discussing the vexed question of how many pit stops to make.
The extra fuel's going to put it over the edge.
Somebody over the edge?
Yeah.
Nobody knew what the other teams would do, but for Jordan's, the apparent choice was between 2 and 3 stops, and each option had potential problems.
Same as the Suzuka. There was just
The decision was to go for 3. The race was only half an hour away. All the cars were formed up on the grid. Here was a chance for the massed mass media and the privileged pass holders to get out there and pose casually while thousands of petrol heads looked on in envy. Berger pretended not to hear the massed female sighs aimed at him from the grandstands. Andrea was out there to remind Coulthard what it was all for. Alesi was still assuring everyone that he didn't care at all about the $24 million plus luncheon vouchers that Schumacher would be getting from Ferrari next season. I was in the middle of giving Eddie Irvine some advice about that first corner when he noticed that the Benetton team had a joke going, and Schumacher was so carried away with the Adelaide spirit that he forgot not to join in. Nobody except the team members is ever allowed to watch the race from the pit wall, but I had a word in Bernie's ear, and he said he'd see what he could do. Soon all the walk-on parts were written out, leaving nobody on stage except the stars. In the few seconds before the red light went green, every driver had to hold down 800 horsepower with one foot. Banzai, a total of 20,000 horses all heading for the stable door, with the pestiferous Coulthard getting the jump on Hill. Somewhere in the middle of it all, Irvine had already moved up a place. Hill did all that qualifying to get a clear run into open country, and Coulthard beat him to it. With Schumacher not far behind, the last thing Hill needed was an extra test of his nerve. Schumacher had muffed his start and had to chase Berger's Ferrari, but soon caught and passed him with daunting ease. Irvine was doing all right at this stage. So was Barrichello. Taki Inoue, famous for his offs, had an off. Still running a slightly irritating second to Coulthard, Hill opted for an early pit stop, a piece of clear-headed good tactics. Coulthard would also have to make a stop soon, and then it would be Hill's turn to go flat out while his teammate was stationary, so Hill might catch Coulthard on the road. When Coulthard came into the pits, this thought might have been preying on his mind. Something was. Exit Coulthard. Now he would be able to spend more time with Andrea. Barrichello was still going great guns in 8th place, but after an uncharacteristic mistake, he said a short word in Portuguese. Now he would be able to spend more time with the sponsors. The Minardi driver, Pedro Lamy, was in a race of his own, entertaining the crowd vastly. Now he would be able to spend more time with himself. Thanks to Bernie, I had a ringside seat for the unfolding drama. Schumacher came storming out from his pit stop. Alesi's flying Ferrari just managed to squeeze in front. Schumi was in a hurry to catch Damon, so he shaped up to overtake Alesi on the inside. That was when Damon lost his chance to hit Schumi. Alesi hit him instead. Both cars were fatally damaged. Alesi came in to retire. Maybe he had cared about Schumacher's salary after all. As Schumacher came in to retire, the thought arose that next year he wouldn't need other cars to put him out of the race. On past form, the Ferrari would be able to do that all by itself. Berger gave further proof of this shortly afterwards, when once again his prima donna Ferrari blew its top on a high note. All over the world, women's hearts went out to him like migrating birds. Sensationally, Eddie Irvine was all set to come third at least. After recent disappointments, a podium position for Jordan would do the team the world of good. But Eddie Jordan had seen something ominous in the readouts. I looked too and couldn't see anything. In the Jordan garage, the engineers could see everything. There was a glitch in the air valve grommet, or a grommet in the glitch. Eddie Jordan knew the word. You had to be a space scientist to fully understand, but whatever was wrong, Irvine had to come into the pits to have it fixed. Total panic ensued. The air bottle required to top up the glitch grommet declined to make itself available. It didn't matter. The glitch grommet was a goner anyway. It was one of those things. One of those 1,000 little things that all have to go right, or else the whole enterprise comes unstuck. Irvine was out of the race. Next year, he would be able to conk out on a bigger budget because he was joining Ferrari as Schumacher's teammate. For the Jordan team, it was another cruel disappointment.
The valve system in the engine is worked by air, and there was a small leakage somewhere, and we tried to top it up a couple of times, and obviously it didn't work. It would have stayed going the first time, it stayed going for 2 laps, and when we topped it up the second time, it was just about over after 1 lap, so there was just no way.
Johnny Herbert, second spot in his grasp, lost it to a broken engine. So Irvine would have been second if he'd kept going. With the race turning into a demolition derby behind him, Damon Hill fled on to the checkered flag. It was a sweet fulfillment after a year of frustration. With a bit of assistance from Alesi at the right moment, Damon had well and truly shown Schumi where to get off. To their own vast surprise, Olivier Panis and Gianni Morbidelli were up there with him, but 300 million viewers worldwide had their attention all on Damon. Next season, he would be staying with Williams at a greatly increased salary, and his chances of winning the World Championship would be excellent. For now, it was home to the kids and their crayons. Out front, the season was over. Back here, the next season had already started. Well prepared for his new position at Ferrari, Eddie Irvine told me he had already learned 2 Italian words, oversteery and understeery. Schumacher was wondering whether he really needs that private Boeing airliner he was planning to buy. The other drivers have been giving him a lot of stick about it, and really he's not that arrogant. He just knows he's better than anybody else. Andrea was telling Coulthard that when they got home to Monte Carlo, she would do the driving, if it was all the same to him. He took it quite well. When Alesi was told he might be earning less at Benetton next year than he had at Ferrari, his bubbling high spirits showed he didn't care a bit. Berger was going to Benetton too. The girls might not find the car quite such an attractive color, but it was still a steady job. The best way to get rich is to grow old. Barrichello was talking to Brazilian radio down the phone, telling them why he was staying at Jordan, because next year's car was going to be good. Mr. Jordan said so. While Eddie Jordan went on hustling, his team packed up for the long flight home. The Grand Prix circus was folding its tents, but for the people in the circus it never really stops. It just moves on to another town. Like any other circus, it leaves a circle on the grass, and small boys making plans to run away and follow it to the ends of the earth, their heads full of dreams about being out there in the ring.